Legacy, Kunita, again, the legacy of a man who stood firm in his beliefs, no matter what they were, so much so that leaving the ANC, he would rather do than stand for what he saw as a party that no longer stood for the values he cherished.
Absolutely. He was the national chairperson of the ANC when former President Thabo Mbeki was at the helm of the party, and when the fallout of the Polokwane moment happened and the subsequent recall of former President Thabo Mbeki, he said he had no place left for him in the ANC, and the ANC had lost its course. He was vociferous in his criticism of the party, being outspoken on the party's decline and losing its way. When former President Jacob Zuma took over, he stood firm in his opposition. You'd recall the scandals that unfolded during that 10-year period, whether it was the Nkandla scandal, whether it was, state capture. Mosiuoa Terror Lekota was front and center. He led many a march with other opposition leaders to parliament protesting against state capture. He had been a loud voice in parliament, despite the fact that over the years, from 2009 to 2014, and onwards, the party had less and less support, starting off as the third largest party in parliament up until 2019, when it only had 2 seats in parliament, but using any opportunity he can to criticize government, to hold them accountable. And he believed strongly in the role of a robust opposition, often advocating for the unification of opposition forces in parliament, especially during that time when there was state capture in South Africa, and it was opposition leaders that really had to play an important role in holding power to account. Now, his history is much longer than that, and his legacy lasts long into, before that, having started in politics, Arabile, in the 80s, where he became politically active at Turfloop. He spoke very fondly of his time there at the University of the North, then joining the United Democratic Front, becoming the Premier of the Free State, and then moving to the National Council of Provinces, and then becoming Defence Minister.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Free State a little bit, actually, because on the line we're actually joined by Dr. Roy Jankelson, the Democratic Alliance Free State provincial leader, joining us on the line now. Dr. Jankelson, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. Perhaps you can reflect as well on a man who, in your province, held so much revered respect.
Good morning. Firstly, the Democratic Alliance would like to express our condolences to the family and friends of Mosiuoa Terror Lekota. He was also known as Terror Lekota because of his prowess on the soccer field, and I think that is the nickname that everyone fondly called him in the Free State. He was a son of the Free State, born in Kroonstad. Incidentally, I was also born in Kroonstad. And throughout his political career, he also maintained his roots in the Free State as his main constituency. The Free State is going to miss Terror Lekota because of the role that he played here as the first Premier of the Free State between 1994 and 1996, before going to the National Council of Provinces as a Free State representative, where he also served as chairperson. And then I also had the privilege of serving on the Portfolio Committee of Defence when Terror Lekota was the Defence Minister, and I was at one stage the Shadow Minister of Defence in Parliament. And he was always a gentleman politician. And throughout his career, he represented the unwavering quest to build a non-racial and inclusive constitutional democracy in South Africa. And we believe that is also one of the reasons why he signed his divorce papers with the ANC and formed COPE in 2008, because of these strong beliefs in democracy, his fight against corruption, and his non-racism, which he embraced and which we had great respect for.
Yeah. Dr. Jankelson, do you think that there's still the essence of his kind of leadership, of his kind of spirit, shall I say, in whether it be the politics of the Free State itself, which perhaps is a living legacy and testament to how much he was revered in the province and what he shared, but also overall in South Africa's political structures. Would we be able to live his legacy through?
I think the tolerance which we find in the Free State, especially on a political level, is also due to the role of people like Terror Lekota and the values that he embraced and continued to embrace throughout his political career, which is also one of the reasons he left the ANC. And I think the Free State has that legacy, and that is something which we will continue to embrace.
Yeah, very important there. Dr. Roy Jankelson, thank you so much for joining us to share your thoughts as well on the passing of Mosiuoa Terror Lekota, Democratic Alliance Free State provincial leader, joining us on the line. Kunita, perhaps I come back to you, and I suppose it's in the Free State where he, in many ways, cut his teeth in the political sphere post-apartheid, and technically, obviously, before that, because the forming of whether it be the UDF or his political understanding really comes from that province and certainly helped form the foundations of who he was.
Absolutely, and very popular in that province. He was the first post-apartheid premier of the Free State, and then was elevated to a national level, made his way all the way to the top 6 of the ANC. And, you know, on a personal level, he was extremely personable, a person who could relate to many people, someone who could laugh at himself. There was a time and a moment that I would never forget in the 2014 election where he had promised before election that if COPE had to reduce support, remember in 2009 they had reached over 1 million votes,
yes,
and they were the 3rd largest party. And when he was asked to say in 2014, if you reduce support, what would he do? And he said he'd eat his hat. And in 2014, as election results were coming in and it showed that they had lost some support, he, you know, took the moment and laughed at himself and pretended to eat his hat. Yeah. And that characterized someone who held firm on his beliefs, but also was part and parcel of the jovial nature of what it was to be South African and what it was to be members of the opposition. I'd also recall very, front and center to my mind how they held hands with other opposition leaders, yeah, marching to the union buildings. And you know, it was a big step to bring together opposition party leaders, Julius Malema, Bantu Holomisa, etc., in that protest against state capture and what was at the, what was at the moment under the Jacob Zuma administration, and speaking, quite firmly about the need of uniting the opposition and playing an important elderly role in Parliament up until 2024. But again, his party was not without problems. There were several times when there was efforts to remove him. There was a press conference in 2022 that I will never forget, where party members stormed and he sat there in shock as they tried to say that he was no longer fit to lead the party. So COPE having a lot of trouble up until 2024 when it was not represented in Parliament anymore. But now the party saying that they will use his death as a moment to mobilize for the party and to reaffirm COPE's role in opposition politics in the country.
Yeah, and some might say that 2022 storming that you made note of may have offered a prelude to the concerns and the issues that then plagued them going into the 2024 election, where they lost their parliamentary seats, which meant that they no longer were represented in Parliament. But you made note of that time during the Jacob Zuma tenures, where you saw Terror Lekota holding hands with other leaders and bringing them together as there was this fight against corruption and state capture at the time. And in many ways, that offered a kind of UDF moment again, right? It was the United Democratic Front in a way, because his desire to bring other people together, bring parties together, collaboration, cooperation amongst those parties, to build on the legacies and the strength in numbers, as he would always want as well, was very important. And I think that really led a lot of his leadership moving into the Party of Congress of the People.
And he was no doubt a pioneer of democracy in South Africa, and he held onto that quite firmly. You'd recall that as much as he was an opponent of former President Jacob Zuma, he held firm in his criticism of incumbent President Cyril Ramaphosa. He was very critical of the Tumamina euphoria that we had seen post-2018, and urging consistently that there must not be a free pass given to the president and to the ANC just by virtue of sentiment. So playing an important role in that robustness of Parliament, and being very critical when Parliament was used and repurposed by the executive as a rubber stamping mechanism, and saying constantly at the time that Parliament is not an arm of the executive and that it must be used to hold the executive accountable. Recall, Parliament was severely criticised by the Constitutional Court for its role in the Nkandla judgment, for example, in 2016, and Mosiuoa Terror being front and centre in that criticism. And so, as someone who was born to migrant workers, he's spent his early, his mum was a domestic worker, his father was a driver, coming from humble beginnings, but holding firm onto this idea of democracy, as many of his peers in the United Democratic Front held, and pushing through to a post-democratic South Africa, taking over the mantle, leading this country, and ultimately playing an important part in protecting democratic institutions.
Yeah, very important one there. Let me just close things off as well with Dr. Roy Jankelson, the Democratic Alliance Free State provincial leader. Again, we made note of, with my colleague Konita here in studio, that it was still his criticism of incumbent President Cyril Ramaphosa that still stood firm, showing the values of a man who did not waver, despite who was in leadership, Dr. Jankelson.
Yes, he was known for his unwavering principled stance against issues such as corruption, where he felt that the Constitution was being undermined. And I think one of the legacies that he leaves in the Free State is the spirit of Ubuntu, that political tolerance, the consensus-seeking, humility, all of these values that I think the Free State population embraces today is one of the things that he strived for, which he lived by, and one of the legacies that he's going to leave in the province as a prominent political leader.
Yeah, very importantly as well. All right. Dr. Roy Jankelson, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing in your memories of a man who we're now mourning, we're now speaking of in the past, unfortunately. The Democratic Alliance Free State provincial leader, Dr. Roy Jankelson, joining us there for that one. We're also looking to actually speak to former politician and trade unionist as well, Willie Madisha, who we hope is on the line right now. Mr. Madisha, thank you so much for the time. We hope you can actually hear us, and it certainly is a somber mood to be speaking to you on, but if you could share your thoughts of the man we now have to speak on in the past, unfortunately, Mosiuoa Terror Lekota.
Yes, thank you very much. I must say it is very sad that his life has ended, albeit some of us knew over a very long time that he was not well. We have worked together, that is himself, myself, and others, since way back in 1983, when we were in the UDF. But then when I was president of COSATU, and he as national chair of the ANC, we worked together, as alliance partners, our organizations as alliance partners. When we formed COPE, both of us were there. We went to Parliament, and we worked very closely. I must say that it's very sad that it has come to this kind of a situation. So I want to say condolences to his family and all those who were next to him at this stage.
Yeah, perhaps we can talk as well just about the the principles of the man? Because you speak of that severe leadership battle that went on between yourselves, but it was still his principles that he always tried to stand by and stand towards. Perhaps you can talk to us about what you thought of the man because of those principles and how he fared internally.
You know, politics is politics, and in politics, you argue, you debate, you fight, you do all these things. But then after that, you cannot say that we are enemies. You know, in politics, that's the law of the jungle that permeates really that realm. So we have been in that kind of situation. But then I want to say that he committed himself to the liberation of the people of our country. He committed himself to the contribution of the growth of our country. And, you know, up to this stage, I want to say that this memory will never be, you know, removed from, you know, our people. Yes, you are correct. We did not agree here and there until some of us left that organization. But I want to say that we still respected him even after we had left. And even when some of us go to his funeral, we will be able to, you know, say whenever we are asked that we worked together. And some of us will embrace him when we, of course, meet with him the next time, because we obviously shall go there as well.
Yeah. Mr. Magashule, just perhaps if you could share just perhaps final thoughts, as personal as you possibly could get, in terms of just time even away from the political sphere. I mean, both of you having been associated with the ANC and then forming COPE together, but having held a lot then personally together, and in that time, the kind of energy perhaps you felt from him, the reason why you both went on to start COPE, in fact, as well, sharing a similar vision at that time. If you could share perhaps that and what really stood out for you in the man you served with.
You know, we believed, and like I'm saying, like you are saying, we worked together from, you know, in the 80s, you know, and we then felt after 2007 in Polokwane conference, when President Beg was kicked out, and we looked at the reasons that permeated that conference and all the kind of things that were there. And we had said that this is wrong, this is right, and so on, but other people did not agree with us. But then not just agreeing, not just agreement, but then as you know, things just became too bad. And we felt the best thing for us to take forward the revolution, we better go away. And that is how we formed COPE. And we were friends, I must say. And even where we stayed in Cape Town, we would go and eat together. We watched the same games together. And we shared the same drinks together whenever it was feasible. We debated together. Yeah. But then, like I'm saying, in politics, you don't have enemies. You'll have challenges. You'll kick each other there and there, but embrace each other and or one another after that. So it's very sad, and I hope his soul will rest in peace. And I hope his family will be okay.
Former COPE leader and co-founder as well, Willie Madisha, really appreciate you joining us to really get into the relationship you shared with the man you split away from the ANC with to form the Congress of the People, as we continue to think back and look back at the life, of course, of Mosiuoa Terror Lekota, who passed away at the age of 77 earlier this morning. Congress of the People releasing their own statement there as well from They're sharing their thoughts on him. But speaking about the Free State, because we've been speaking about that province too, the former premier of the Free State province, and a man who, in some ways as well, also had a bit of a strained relationship at times with Mosiuoa Terror Lekota. We have Ace Magashule joining us on the line to speak on the man who perhaps he challenged a lot, but clearly a man who was also right there, willing to fight for the country, fight for the legacy of what apartheid meant, and against it, should I say, as well, because that would have been ultimately very, very important. Mr. Magashule, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it. And perhaps we get your thoughts on the man we're now speaking of this morning. That's Mosiuoa Terror Lekota.
Well, let me first pass the condolences to the entire family of Lekota. I have been informed from time to time because I'm very close to some of the Terror Lekota's relatives, and our deepest condolences. I have worked with Terror Lekota not only as the Premier of the Free State in 1994, during those dark days of apartheid, the years of struggle, when Oliver Tambo made a call that we must form rudimentary organs of people's power. Terror Lekota is one of those comrades and leaders I've worked with during the early 80s, 83, when the United Democratic Front was actually established. We used to crisscross the country with him, with the likes of Alan Busak, with the likes of Popo Molefe, with the likes of Aubrey Mokoena, and many comrades in the Free State and in Gauteng especially. I have crisscrossed the country with him, with Dennis Bloom from Kronstadt. That's where sometimes we used to hide at Dennis Bloom's father's place. And Terror Lekota was also there. And we have worked together in the United Democratic Front. He was one of the publicity secretary of the United Democratic Front.
Yeah.
And beyond apartheid, during the years of post-apartheid 1994, when he became the Premier, we were in the Free State and we were his leaders. When he was the Premier, I was the Deputy Chair with Pat Matosa, and we had some issues, but we moved on beyond those little political challenges. We have been respecting one another, each other, and that's why one will be able to say, definitely may his soul rest in peace. He was one of the giants in our revolution in our struggle against apartheid.
Yeah, perhaps you can also lead us into just the character of the man who, as you said, you served with and you worked with quite a lot, whether it be pre or during apartheid or post-apartheid in the country, still to lead South Africa to hopefully a better country.
Well, he was very fearless. He was very straight. He was not diplomatic, and he was able to crack jokes. I remember those days when we never had money. He will make us if we are in a hurry to go somewhere. We'll just get into a shop and buy a loaf of bread and milk. And he will say, hey, we are in a rush. We can't be sitting down and eating. At that time, I remember then I will definitely know that there was no money. And he was able to crack jokes. He was really somebody very approachable, but fearless and straightforward. And he was a fighter. That's one thing I like for him. He was very principled, and he was a fighter. He could not... even Nelson Mandela, he during that conference, the first conference in Durban, he was the man who brought the ANC National Conference to a standstill when people wanted more women into the leadership, and he said, no, everybody, every person must be elected on merit. That was Terror Lekota.
Sure. Just the man you want us as a country, as people, as parties, political parties or otherwise, to also remember. What is the kind of man you would say you would want us to always remember out of Mosiuoa Terror Lekota's life?
Whatever has happened, the fact of the matter, the historical fact and the fact which is undisputed, is that Terror Lekota is one of the freedom fighters, a fearless man who has actually fought against the mighty apartheid regime. And that's how he must be remembered. He mustn't be remembered by small little political issues. I think he deserves to be buried like a giant during those years of struggle. That's how we should actually remember him. And that's why we'll always say, may his soul and spirit rest in peace.
Yeah. Former Free State Premier Ace Magashule, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it this morning as we just reflect very quickly on the life there of Mosiuoa Terror Lekota, who passed away in the early hours of this morning at the age of 77. It's our breaking news. Konita Hunter still joining me as well in studio. Just we do have to go to an ad break very quickly now, Konita, but I suppose just very quickly reflecting on what has been said, a strong man.
Absolutely, and the fact that his political nemesis were able to attest up to his role in fighting for democracy, and the fact that he differed so strongly with his political contemporaries, yet was able to maintain, the sense of Ubuntu and the sense of political decorum with them, able to laugh and joke and even watch some football games. He was very obsessed with football. But again, a man who held firm on the role of democracy and democratic institutions up until his death.
Yeah, very important. A man whose legacy will continue to be shedding more light on